Welcome to Domain 5, Part 6A, Information Asset Security and Control. In this section, the focus shifts to protecting information assets through layered security controls, governance, and secure technology management. We'll explore how organizations protect systems, networks, applications, data, and devices using frameworks, access controls, encryption, monitoring, and security architecture. The section also covers identity and access management, network and endpoint security, cloud and virtualized environments, mobile and wireless technologies, and the protection of sensitive information through classification and encryption. From an audit perspective, the goal is to understand how these controls work together to reduce risk, support compliance, and maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability across the enterprise. Let's get started. Part A introduces the core concepts used to protect information assets across the organization. The focus is on implementing security controls across people, processes, and technology to maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The section begins with information security frameworks, standards, and governance practices. This includes policies, procedures, security awareness, data ownership, and access standards. From there, the focus moves into privacy principles and the protection of personal and sensitive information, including legal and regulatory considerations. Physical and environmental controls are also important. These help protect facilities, equipment, and supporting infrastructure from unauthorized access and environmental threats. Identity and access management then introduces authentication, authorization, remote access security, monitoring, logging, and data leakage prevention. The domain also covers network and endpoint security, including network architectures, protocols, firewalls, internet security, and endpoint protection controls. Data classification and encryption are critical topics. Organizations must classify information correctly and apply appropriate encryption and protection mechanisms based on sensitivity. Public Key Infrastructure, or PKI, supports secure communication, authentication, digital certificates, and trust management. The section also examines web-based communication technologies, virtualization, cloud computing, mobile devices, wireless networks, and Internet of Things devices, along with the risks and controls associated with them. Overall, Part A focuses on layered security controls, governance, monitoring, and secure technology management to protect organizational information assets. This section focuses on the governance and control structures used to protect information assets across the organization. It begins with auditing the Information Security Management Framework to ensure security controls, governance processes, and risk management practices are aligned with standards such as ISO 27001, NIST, and COBIT. Policies, procedures, and standards must also be reviewed regularly to confirm they are documented, communicated, and operating effectively. Security awareness and training play a critical role in reducing human risk. Organizations must build a culture of security awareness through ongoing training and reinforcement. Clear data ownership and accountability are equally important. Data owners, custodians, and users must understand their responsibilities for protecting information assets. The section also covers access standards and security baselines. These help establish consistent security configurations and enforce least privilege access across systems and applications. Finally, user access management and authorization controls ensure that users receive the right level of access throughout their lifecycle, while excessive or inappropriate access is identified and removed. Together, these controls help organizations maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability across their information assets. Information assets are at the center of almost every modern organization. These assets include data, systems, applications, devices, people, and facilities, all of which must be identified, classified, protected, and managed throughout their lifecycle. This diagram explains the difference between frameworks, standards, and guidelines, and how they work together to support information asset security. The first section focuses on frameworks. Frameworks provide structure, governance, and high-level direction. They help organizations understand what needs to be managed and how security should align with business objectives and risk management. Examples include the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, COBIT 2019, the CISA Risk IT Framework, and the CIS Critical Security Controls. These frameworks help organizations establish governance, prioritize risks, and improve overall security maturity. The second section covers standards. Standards define specific requirements that can be audited, measured, and in many cases certified against. ISO/IEC 27001 is a good example, as it defines the requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an information security management system. Other examples include PCI DSS, IEC 62443, and SOC2 related assurance criteria. The third section focuses on guidelines, sometimes referred to as codes of practice. Guidelines provide recommended practices, implementation advice, and practical examples to support organizations in applying security controls effectively. Examples include ISO/IEC 27002 for information security controls, ISO/IEC 27005 for information security risk management guidance, the NIST SP 800 series, CIS benchmarks, OWASP Top 10, ITIL, and ISO/IEC 27701 for privacy information management guidance. The comparison section highlights the key differences. Frameworks provide overall structure and governance. Standards define auditable requirements. Guidelines explain recommended practices and practical implementation approaches. The diagram also shows how these elements work together. Frameworks establish the foundation and strategic direction. Standards define what must be achieved. Guidelines help organizations understand how to implement and operate those requirements effectively. The overall outcome is improved protection of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information assets, while also supporting compliance, governance, operational consistency, and organizational resilience. The key takeaway is that organizations typically need a combination of frameworks, standards, and guidelines to build an effective and sustainable information security capability. Auditing the information security management framework is about determining whether security controls, governance, and risk management processes are operating effectively and supporting business objectives. The audit process begins with planning. Auditors define the audit scope, objectives, criteria, and methodology. Resources are identified, and an audit plan is developed to guide the engagement. The next step is gathering information. This includes reviewing policies, procedures, standards, risk assessments, metrics, and supporting evidence. Auditors collect the information needed to understand how the framework is designed and implemented. Once information is gathered, auditors assess and evaluate the controls and processes. The focus is on effectiveness, efficiency, compliance, and alignment with recognized standards such as ISO 27001, NIST, or COBIT. Auditors then identify findings by determining strengths, weaknesses, gaps, and root causes. Findings are normally classified based on severity, business impact, and risk exposure. The results are then documented and communicated to management and stakeholders. Reports typically include observations, evidence, risks, and recommendations for improvement. Finally, follow-up activities verify whether corrective actions have been implemented effectively and whether improvements have reduced the identified risks. Key areas of review include governance, risk management, policies and procedures, security controls, awareness and training, and performance measurement. The overall outcome of the audit is to provide assurance that the information security management framework is effective, aligned with business and regulatory requirements, and capable of supporting continual improvement and a stronger security posture. Security policies, procedures, and standards form the foundation of a strong security program and help ensure that controls are consistent, effective, and aligned with business and regulatory requirements. The review process begins with planning the review. Auditors or security teams define the scope, objectives, review criteria, and identify the policies, procedures, and standards that will be assessed. The next step is collecting and gathering documents. This includes obtaining the latest approved versions of documents, related references, and supporting records to ensure the review is based on current information. Once the documents are collected, the review and assessment phase begins. The focus is on adequacy, clarity, consistency, completeness, and alignment with business risks, legal requirements, and security objectives. Auditors also verify that roles, responsibilities, and control expectations are clearly defined. The review then moves into identifying gaps and improvements. This includes finding overlaps, outdated content, conflicting requirements, missing controls, or weaknesses that could impact security or compliance. After issues are identified, documents are updated and approved. Policies, procedures, and standards may be revised. New controls may be introduced, and stakeholder approval is obtained before implementation. The final step is communication and monitoring. Updated documents must be communicated to relevant personnel, supported with awareness or training activities, and reviewed regularly to ensure ongoing effectiveness. Key areas of review include policy content, operational procedures, technical standards, compliance requirements, communication and training, and document maintenance. The overall objective is to ensure that policies, procedures, and standards remain current, practical, enforceable, and capable of supporting secure and compliant operations across the organization. Security awareness and training play a critical role in protecting information assets because people are often both the first line of defense and one of the biggest security risks. The main objective is to build a strong security culture across the organization by improving knowledge, awareness, and secure behavior. Training programs typically cover important topics such as phishing and social engineering, password security, data protection, safe use of technology, security policies and procedures, and incident reporting responsibilities. The awareness process starts by assessing needs. Organizations identify user roles, business risks, regulatory requirements, and the specific training needed for different groups of employees. The next step is developing content. Training material should be relevant, practical, role-based, and aligned with real-world threats and organizational policies. Training is then delivered through multiple methods such as e-learning, instructor-led sessions, phishing simulations, workshops, webinars, newsletters, and short awareness videos. After delivery, organizations evaluate effectiveness by measuring participation, testing knowledge, monitoring behavior changes, and assessing whether security awareness is reducing risk. The final step is continual improvement. Feedback, incident trends, audit results, and new threats are used to improve training programs and keep awareness activities current and effective. Strong awareness programs focus on making training relevant, engaging employees, reinforcing messages regularly, measuring results, recognizing positive behavior, and ensuring leadership support. The overall impact is fewer security incidents caused by human error, stronger accountability, improved compliance, better protection of information assets, and increased organizational resilience. Data ownership and responsibilities are critical for ensuring that information is properly classified, protected, managed, and used throughout its life cycle. A strong data ownership model clearly defines who is accountable for the data, who manages it, and who is authorized to use it. The data owner is accountable for the information asset and how it is used within the organization. The owner defines the purpose of the data, approves access, ensures appropriate classification, and confirms that legal, regulatory, and business requirements are met. The data custodian is responsible for the operational management and protection of the data. This includes implementing security controls, managing storage and backups, maintaining availability, and supporting access requests. Data users are responsible for using information only for authorized business purposes and handling it according to policies, standards, and access permissions. Information security teams provide guidance, monitoring, and security requirements to help protect the data and reduce risk exposure. Internal audit and compliance functions assess whether responsibilities are properly assigned and whether controls are operating effectively. The data ownership lifecycle begins with identifying information assets and understanding their business purpose. Data is then classified based on sensitivity and business impact. Ownership is assigned, and appropriate security controls are implemented. Organizations must continuously monitor and review data usage, access rights, quality, and compliance requirements throughout the lifecycle. Finally, data must be retained and disposed of securely according to legal, regulatory, and organizational requirements. Good practices include maintaining an up-to-date data ownership register, reviewing access rights regularly, clearly communicating responsibilities, and aligning data management activities with business and compliance requirements. Data classification and ownership are essential for protecting information assets and ensuring that data is handled according to its sensitivity and business value. Data classification is the process of categorizing information based on the level of protection required. Confidential data is highly sensitive and could cause severe business impact if exposed. Examples include personally identifiable information, financial records, trade secrets, source code, and legal documents. This type of data normally requires strict access controls, encryption, monitoring, and data leakage prevention controls. Internal data is important to business operations but carries a lower level of sensitivity. Examples include internal reports, project plans, employee information, and customer lists. These assets are typically protected using role-based access controls, secure storage, and regular backups. Limited or internal use data supports day-to-day operations and usually has lower business impact if disclosed. Examples include policies, meeting notes, and training materials. Public data is approved for public release and normally includes marketing material, press releases, and public website content. An important principle is to classify data at the time it is created and review classifications regularly. When there is uncertainty, organizations should classify information at the higher sensitivity level until confirmed otherwise. The second part of the model focuses on data ownership. The data owner is accountable for the information asset, approves access, and establishes policies for its use and protection. The data custodian manages and safeguards the data by implementing technical and operational controls. The data steward focuses on data quality, metadata management, and compliance with policies and standards. Data users are responsible for using information only for authorized business purposes and in accordance with organizational policies. Compliance and legal functions ensure that data handling practices align with laws, regulations, and contractual obligations. The bottom section highlights key controls throughout the data lifecycle. Organizations must identify and classify data, apply appropriate protections, control access using least privilege, monitor usage and incidents, retain information only as long as necessary, dispose of it securely, and review classifications and ownership regularly. Auditing the Information Security Management Framework is about determining whether security controls, governance, and risk management processes are operating effectively and supporting business objectives. The audit process begins with planning. Auditors define the audit scope, objectives, criteria, and methodology. Resources are identified, and an audit plan is developed to guide the engagement. The next step is gathering information. This includes reviewing policies, procedures, standards, risk assessments, metrics, and supporting evidence. Auditors collect the information needed to understand how the framework is designed and implemented. Once information is gathered, auditors assess and evaluate the controls and processes. The focus is on effectiveness, efficiency, compliance, and alignment with recognized standards such as ISO 27001, NIST, or COBIT. Auditors then identify findings by determining strengths, weaknesses, gaps, and root causes. Findings are normally classified based on severity, business impact, and risk exposure. The results are then documented and communicated to management and stakeholders. Reports typically include observations, evidence, risks, and recommendations for improvement. Finally, Follow-up activities verify whether corrective actions have been implemented effectively and whether improvements have reduced the identified risks. Key areas of review include governance, risk management, policies and procedures, security controls, awareness and training, and performance measurement. The overall outcome of the audit is to provide assurance that the information security management framework is effective, aligned with business and regulatory requirements, and capable of supporting continual improvement and a stronger security posture. Access standards and security baselines help organizations ensure that systems, applications, networks, and data are protected through consistent and secure configurations. The main objective is to ensure only authorized users can access information assets while enforcing minimum security requirements across the organization. Access standards define how access is granted, managed, monitored, and removed. Key access control principles include least privilege, need-to-know access, segregation of duties, role-based access control. User access management includes provisioning, access reviews, recertification, timely deprovisioning, and privileged access management. Authentication standards help verify user identities and often include multi-factor authentication, password complexity requirements, session management, account lockout controls. Access request and approval processes ensure access is formally requested, justified, approved, and periodically reviewed. Monitoring and auditing activities help detect unauthorized access, monitor user activity, and support incident investigations. Security baselines define the minimum secure configuration requirements for systems and infrastructure. Examples include secure server and workstation configurations, application hardening standards, firewall and network configuration standards, cloud security baselines, data protection and encryption settings. The baseline management process typically includes defining baseline requirements, implementing secure configurations, monitoring compliance, reviewing and updating baselines regularly. Key guiding principles include security by default, least privilege, consistency, visibility and monitoring, continuous improvement, accountability. Strong access standards and security baselines improve security consistency, reduce the risk of unauthorized access and data breaches, support compliance requirements, and strengthen the organization's overall security posture. Privacy principles and practices are essential for protecting personal information, maintaining trust, and ensuring compliance with privacy laws and regulations. Privacy is based on the principle that individuals should have control over how their personal information is collected, used, shared, and protected. One of the core privacy principles is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. Organizations must process personal information legally, fairly, and in a transparent manner. Purpose limitation means that personal information should only be collected for specific, legitimate business purposes. Data minimization requires organizations to collect only the information that is necessary and relevant for those purposes. Accuracy is also important. Personal information must be kept accurate, complete, and up to date. Storage limitation means organizations should retain personal information only for as long as it is needed and dispose of it securely when no longer required. Integrity and confidentiality focus on protecting personal information against unauthorized access, disclosure, alteration, or loss. Accountability means organizations must be able to demonstrate compliance with privacy requirements and take responsibility for how personal information is handled. From an audit perspective, auditors evaluate how effectively privacy risks are managed across the organization. This includes reviewing privacy policies, lawful processing practices, consent management, data retention, third-party management, privacy impact assessments, and breach response procedures. Organizations must also implement strong protection measures for personal and sensitive information. These controls include access management, encryption, data classification, masking or anonymization, monitoring and logging, incident management, and secure disposal processes. Regulatory and legal compliance is another major focus area. Organizations may need to comply with laws such as GDPR, CCPA, LGPD, POPIA, and other local privacy regulations. Auditors assess whether organizations have a valid legal basis for processing personal information, support individual privacy rights, manage cross-border data transfers securely, and maintain appropriate contractual protections with third parties. Good privacy practices include embedding privacy by design and by default, conducting regular privacy risk assessments, providing ongoing awareness training, and continuously monitoring privacy controls. The overall objective is to protect personal information, reduce legal and reputational risk, build trust with customers and stakeholders, and support ethical and responsible use of data across the organization. Physical access and environmental controls are critical for protecting information assets from unauthorized access, damage, disruption, and loss. Security is not only about firewalls and passwords. Organizations must also protect buildings, server rooms, equipment, and supporting infrastructure from both physical and environmental threats. A strong physical security program combines managerial, technical, and physical controls. Managerial controls include policies, procedures, defined roles and responsibilities, employee screening, awareness training, incident response processes, and business continuity planning. Technical and logical controls include authentication systems, access control mechanisms, CCTV integration, alarm systems, encryption, logging, and monitoring technologies. Physical controls are the visible safeguards that protect facilities and assets. Examples include fences, gates, locks, biometric access systems, security guards, CCTV cameras, man-traps, secure racks, and environmental monitoring systems. An important concept in this area is continuous monitoring and control effectiveness. Controls must not only exist, they must be tested, reviewed, and maintained regularly to ensure they remain effective in reducing risk. Organizations also face a range of environmental exposures. These include natural events such as floods, fires, lightning, earthquakes, and storms, as well as power failures, water leaks, overheating, humidity issues, and equipment failure. To reduce these risks, organizations implement environmental controls such as fire detection and suppression systems, UPS devices, backup generators, surge protectors, FACS systems, raised flooring, and regular maintenance and inspections. Physical access threats can include unauthorized entry, theft, vandalism, sabotage, tailgating, copying sensitive information, or damage to equipment and facilities. To address these risks, organizations implement layered security controls such as perimeter security, visitor management, security patrols, controlled entry points, access badges, logging, and surveillance systems. From an audit perspective, auditors review both the design and effectiveness of these controls. This includes inspecting entry and exit controls, reviewing visitor logs, verifying CCTV retention, checking environmental monitoring records, reviewing maintenance reports, and assessing emergency response and recovery procedures. Auditors also verify whether controls are aligned with organizational policies, legal requirements, and industry standards. One of the key concepts to remember is defense in depth. No single control is enough on its own. Strong physical and environmental security relies on multiple layers of preventive, detective, and corrective controls working together. Identity and Access Management, or IAM, is the process of controlling who can access systems, applications, and data within an organization. The primary goal is to ensure that the right users have the right level of access at the right time, while preventing unauthorized access and reducing security risk. IAM begins with identification and authentication. Users first identify themselves with a username or account, and then prove their identity using passwords, tokens, smart cards, or biometrics such as fingerprints or facial recognition. Modern organizations commonly use multi-factor authentication to strengthen security by combining multiple authentication methods. Another important concept is authorization. Once users are authenticated, IAM controls what they are allowed to access based on their role, responsibilities, and business requirements. This is typically enforced through principles such as least privilege and need to know. The slide also highlights access control software operating across different technology layers, including applications, databases, operating systems, and networks. These controls help enforce security policies consistently across the environment. Single sign-on, or SSO, is another important capability. SSO allows users to authenticate once and securely access multiple systems, improving usability and reducing password fatigue. Remote access security is also a major focus area, especially with remote and hybrid work. Organizations use technologies such as VPNs, encryption, endpoint security, and monitoring to secure remote connections. The diagram also introduces biometrics, which use physical or behavioral characteristics to verify identity and strengthen authentication controls. From an audit perspective, IAM reviews typically focus on user provisioning, access approvals, password policies, multi-factor authentication, privileged accounts, segregation of duties, access reviews, and monitoring of user activity. Key access management controls help organizations protect systems, applications, and sensitive information from unauthorized access and misuse. The slide highlights several important control areas that work together to strengthen security across the organization. The first area is remote access security. As organizations support remote and hybrid work, secure access from external locations becomes critical. Controls such as VPNs, encryption, multi-factor authentication, device security, and activity monitoring help reduce the risk of unauthorized access. The second area is privileged access management, or PM. Privileged accounts have elevated permissions and therefore present a higher security risk if compromised. PAM solutions help organizations control, monitor, and secure administrator and high-risk accounts through approval workflows, session monitoring, credential management, and least privilege enforcement. Logging and monitoring is another key control area. Organizations need visibility into user activity, authentication attempts, privileged actions, and suspicious behavior. Logs are collected and monitored through tools such as CM platforms to support threat detection, investigations, compliance, and incident response. The slide also highlights access reviews and recertification. Organizations should regularly review user access rights to ensure employees only retain the access necessary for their current roles. This helps reduce excessive privileges, orphaned accounts, and segregation of duty issues. Another important control is data leakage prevention, or DLP. DLP technologies help prevent sensitive information from being accidentally or intentionally exposed through email, cloud platforms, web uploads, USB devices, or other transfer methods. Together, these controls help mitigate common risks such as unauthorized access, credential theft, privilege abuse, insider threats, data breaches, and regulatory non-compliance. Several best practices are reinforced throughout the slide. These include enforcing least privilege, using multi-factor authentication, continuously monitoring access activity, reviewing permissions regularly, educating users, and ensuring security policies are properly documented and enforced. From an audit perspective, these areas are often reviewed to determine whether access controls are properly designed, consistently implemented, effectively monitored, and aligned with organizational risk and compliance requirements. Overall, strong access management controls are essential for protecting information assets, reducing security risk, and maintaining accountability across the organization. User access management and authorization controls are essential for ensuring that only authorized users can access systems, applications, and data. The main objective is simple: give the right users the right access to the right resources at the right time, and for the right reasons. The process begins with an access request. A user requests access based on a business need, and that request is reviewed and approved before access is provisioned. Once access is granted, organizations must continuously monitor and review permissions to ensure users still require the access they have. When roles change or employees leave the organization, Access must be updated or removed promptly. The slide also highlights the full user access lifecycle, from onboarding and active access management through to role changes and offboarding. Strong authorization controls are critical in this process. Role-based access control, or RBAC, assigns permissions based on job roles and responsibilities. Attribute-based access control uses conditions such as location, device, time, or department to make access decisions. The principle of least privilege ensures users only receive the minimum access necessary to perform their duties. Segregation of duties is another important concept. This prevents one individual from having excessive control over critical processes, reducing the risk of fraud, abuse, or error. Multi-factor authentication strengthens security by requiring more than one method of verification before granting access. Regular access certification and recertification reviews help organizations confirm that access rights remain appropriate over time. The slide also emphasizes several key principles, including need-to-know access, accountability, transparency, and continuous review and improvement. From an audit perspective, auditors typically review access request procedures, approval workflows, provisioning processes, privileged access controls, user access reviews, logging and monitoring, segregation of duties, and offboarding controls. The overall goal is to reduce unauthorized access, protect sensitive information, improve accountability, and ensure compliance with organizational policies and regulatory requirements. Access control models define how organizations manage and restrict access to systems, applications, and information assets. This slide compares the three main access control models: role-based access control, mandatory access control, and discretionary access control. Role-based access control, or RBAC, grants access based on a user's role within the organization. Permissions are assigned to roles, and users inherit access through those roles. For example, an HR manager may automatically receive access to HR systems and employee records because of their job function. RBAC is widely used in enterprise environments because it simplifies administration, supports least privilege, and makes access management easier to scale. Mandatory access control, or MAC, is a stricter and more centralized model. In MAC environments, access decisions are enforced by system policies and security labels rather than by individual users. Users cannot change permissions themselves. Access is based on classifications and clearances, such as confidential, secret, or top secret. MAC is commonly used in military, government, and highly sensitive environments where strong centralized control is required. Discretionary access control, or DAC, gives resource owners the ability to decide who can access their files or resources. For example, a user may share a folder or document with another employee and decide what level of access they receive. DAC provides flexibility and ease of sharing, but it can introduce security risks if permissions are not managed properly. The slide also compares these models in terms of flexibility, security, and management approach. RBAC offers a balance between security and operational efficiency. MAC provides the highest level of security and control, but with less flexibility. DAC is the most flexible, but generally provides a lower level of centralized security governance. An important concept to remember is that organizations often use a combination of these models depending on business requirements and risk levels. From an audit perspective, auditors review whether access control models are properly implemented, aligned with business and security requirements, support least privilege, and adequately protect sensitive information assets. The overall objective is to ensure secure, controlled, and accountable access while balancing security, usability, and operational efficiency. Identity and access management is not only about granting access, it is also about monitoring, controlling, auditing, and protecting how that access is used across the organization. This slide focuses on several advanced IAM concepts that help strengthen security and accountability. The first area is audit logging and monitoring system access. Organizations must record and monitor user activities, authentication attempts, configuration changes, privileged account usage, and access to sensitive data. These logs provide visibility into suspicious activity, support investigations, and help organizations meet compliance and audit requirements. The slide also highlights naming conventions for logical access controls. Consistent naming standards make systems easier to manage, reduce confusion, improve reporting, and support automation and auditing. Another important concept is federated identity management, or identity federation. This allows users to authenticate through one trusted identity provider and securely access resources across different systems or organizations without needing separate accounts everywhere. Federation improves user experience and simplifies administration, but it also requires strong trust relationships, governance, and security controls. The slide then focuses on auditing logical access controls. Auditors review whether access controls are properly designed, implemented, monitored, and aligned with business and security requirements. This includes reviewing access approvals, user provisioning and deprovisioning, segregation of duties, access reviews, logging, monitoring, and compliance with policies and standards. Another major topic is data leakage and data leakage prevention, or DLP. Data leakage occurs when sensitive or confidential information is exposed, transferred, or shared without authorization. Common leakage channels include email, cloud storage, web uploads, instant messaging, removable media, and file sharing platforms. DLP controls help organizations discover sensitive data, monitor how it is used, detect policy violations, and prevent unauthorized disclosure. Across all these areas, the slide reinforces several important IAM best practices. These include enforcing least privilege, using strong authentication methods such as multi-factor authentication, regularly reviewing access rights, continuously monitoring user activity, complying with legal and regulatory requirements, and promoting security awareness across the organization. Identity and access management is all about ensuring that the right people have the right access to the right systems at the right time. One of the most important concepts in IAM is understanding the difference between authentication and authorization. Authentication verifies who you are. This usually happens through passwords, PINs, tokens, or biometrics. Authorization happens after authentication and determines what you are allowed to access and what actions you can perform. The slide also highlights password controls and best practices. Strong password management includes minimum length requirements, complexity rules, password history, account lockout controls, secure password storage, and monitoring for compromised credentials. Organizations should avoid weak passwords, password reuse, and sharing credentials across systems. Another major focus area is multi-factor authentication, or MFA. MFA strengthens security by combining multiple authentication factors such as something you know, something you have, and something you are. This significantly reduces the risk of unauthorized access, especially when passwords are stolen or compromised. Biometrics are also becoming increasingly common in modern authentication systems. Examples include fingerprint scans, facial recognition, iris scans, voice recognition, and behavioral biometrics. These methods improve security and convenience, but they also introduce privacy, storage, and data protection considerations. The slide also introduces single sign-on, or SSO. SSO allows users to authenticate once and securely access multiple systems without repeatedly entering credentials. This improves user experience, reduces password fatigue, and simplifies identity management. Federated identity extends this concept across organizations or trusted domains. Users can authenticate through one trusted identity provider and access services in another environment using standards such as SAML, OAuth, or OpenID Connect. Throughout all these areas, several core security principles remain important. These include least privilege, regular access reviews, strong authentication, monitoring and logging, user awareness, and protecting identity systems and credentials. From an audit perspective, organizations must ensure that authentication and access controls are properly implemented, monitored, and aligned with business, security, and compliance requirements. Overall, IAM plays a critical role in protecting systems, users, and sensitive information from unauthorized access and misuse. Data leakage prevention, or DLP, is focused on protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access, transfer, disclosure, or exposure. The goal of DLP is to ensure that sensitive data is only accessed and shared by authorized users, for approved business purposes, and in accordance with organizational policies. The slide begins by highlighting the risks associated with data leakage. Sensitive information can be exposed accidentally or intentionally through email, cloud storage, messaging platforms, removable media, printing, or compromised endpoints. These incidents can lead to financial loss, regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. A key part of DLP is understanding where sensitive data exists and how it moves across the organization. This starts with identifying and classifying sensitive information such as customer data, financial records, intellectual property, or personal information. Once data is identified, organizations continuously monitor how that data is used, shared, stored, and transferred. DLP solutions are designed to detect suspicious behavior and policy violations in real time. For example, they can identify attempts to email confidential files externally, upload sensitive documents to cloud storage, copy data to USB devices, or print restricted information. When a policy violation is detected, DLP controls can automatically block, quarantine, encrypt, restrict, or alert security teams depending on the organization's policies. The slide also highlights several modern DLP capabilities. These include real-time monitoring, policy-based automation, machine learning, automated workflows, analytics, reporting, and broad protection across endpoints, networks, cloud platforms, and SaaS environments. Another important concept is user awareness. Technology alone is not enough. Organizations must educate users on proper data handling, acceptable use, classification requirements, and secure behaviors. The slide also reinforces several best practices. These include discovering and classifying data, defining clear DLP policies, applying least privilege and need-to-know principles, monitoring controls regularly, training users, and continuously reviewing and improving policies as risks evolve. From an audit perspective, auditors often review DLP configurations, monitoring reports, incident records, policy exceptions, user activity logs, classification reports, and evidence that controls are operating effectively. Automated data leakage prevention tools help organizations detect, monitor, and automatically protect sensitive information before it leaves the organization. Rather than relying only on manual monitoring, modern DLP solutions use automation, analytics, and policy enforcement to reduce the risk of accidental or intentional data exposure. The process usually starts with discovering and classifying sensitive information across endpoints, servers, cloud platforms, email systems, and business applications. Once the data is identified, the DLP platform continuously monitors how that information is used, transferred, shared, or stored. The dashboard shown here provides real-time visibility into security events, including blocked incidents, alerts generated, policy violations, and the amount of data being scanned across the environment. Modern DLP solutions can detect suspicious behavior such as uploading confidential documents to personal cloud storage, emailing sensitive files externally, copying classified data to USB devices, or downloading unusually large amounts of information. Artificial intelligence and behavioral analytics are becoming increasingly important in DLP platforms. These technologies help identify abnormal user behavior, insider threats, risky data transfers, and unusual access patterns that traditional rule-based systems may miss. Another major capability is automated response actions. When a policy violation occurs, the system can automatically block the transfer, quarantine files, encrypt sensitive content, generate alerts, notify managers, create incident tickets, or escalate events directly to the Security Operations Center. The slide also highlights that DLP protection must cover multiple channels. This includes email, web traffic, cloud storage, endpoints, removable media, collaboration platforms, databases, applications, and even print and scan activities. Organizations may deploy DLP solutions on premises, in the cloud, or in hybrid environments depending on their architecture and security requirements. Several well-known DLP platforms are also shown, including Microsoft Purview DLP, Semantic DLP, Forcepoint, Trellix, Palo Alto Networks Enterprise DLP, and Proofpoint. From an audit perspective, automated DLP solutions generate valuable evidence. Auditors may review DLP policy configurations, incident logs, block transmission reports, user activity monitoring records, classification reports, dashboards, exception approvals, and audit trails to verify that controls are operating effectively. The overall objective is to prevent data breaches, reduce regulatory and reputational risk, improve visibility into sensitive data flows, automate security enforcement, and strengthen trust in the organization's information security program. Network and endpoint security form the foundation of protecting modern enterprise environments. Organizations rely on secure networks to connect users, systems, applications, cloud platforms, and data, while endpoint security protects the devices that access those resources. The slide begins with network infrastructure, which includes routers, switches, firewalls, wireless access points, communication links, and the protocols that allow systems to communicate securely and efficiently. Strong infrastructure design is critical because the network supports business operations, availability, scalability, and secure connectivity across the organization. Enterprise network architectures are then designed to support business requirements while reducing risk. This includes segmentation, distributed access, integration between on-premises and cloud environments, and the use of core, distribution, and access layers to improve performance, resilience, and security. The slide also introduces several common network types. A personal area network connects devices over short distances, while local area networks support offices and campuses. Storage area networks connect storage systems, metropolitan area networks connect larger citywide locations, and wide area networks connect organizations across countries and regions. Wireless wide area networks provide mobile connectivity using technologies such as 4th generation and 5th generation communications. Network services are another key area. These services support business functionality and include file services, email services, print services, remote access services, directory services, and network management capabilities. Standards and protocols are essential because they allow systems from different vendors and technologies to communicate consistently. Examples include Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol, Domain Name System, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, and wireless standards such as IEEE 802.11. The slide also introduces the Open Systems Interconnection Model, commonly called the OSI model. This layered framework explains how data moves across networks, from the physical transmission of bits, all the way up to the application layer used by business systems. Understanding the OSI model helps auditors and security professionals identify where controls operate, troubleshoot network problems, and assess security risks across different layers. The final section focuses on endpoint security. Endpoints include laptops, desktops, servers, tablets, and mobile devices connected to the network. Key controls include anti-malware solutions, endpoint detection and response technologies, encryption, patch management, access control, device hardening, continuous monitoring, and policy enforcement. The overall message is that network security and endpoint security must work together. A secure network without secure endpoints still creates risk, and secure devices connected to an insecure network remain vulnerable. Together, layered network and endpoint controls help organizations build resilient, trusted, and secure enterprise environments. The Open Systems Interconnection Model, commonly called the OSI model, is a conceptual framework that explains how systems communicate across a network. It breaks network communication into 7 layers, with each layer performing a specific function. Starting at the bottom is the physical layer. This layer is responsible for transmitting raw bits across physical media such as cables, fiber, wireless signals, and network connectors. Above that is the data link layer, which handles framing, media access control addressing, and local network communication between devices on the same network segment. The network layer is responsible for logical addressing and routing. This is where Internet Protocol operates, allowing packets to move between networks and across the Internet. The transport layer provides end-to-end communication between systems. Protocols such as Transmission Control Protocol and User Datagram Protocol operate here to manage reliability, segmentation, and flow control. The session layer establishes, manages, and terminates communication sessions between systems and applications. The presentation layer focuses on data translation, encryption, and compression. This ensures that data is formatted correctly and securely for applications to use. Finally, the application layer provides network services directly to users and applications. Protocols such as Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, File Transfer Protocol, Domain Name System, and Simple Mail Transfer Protocol operate at this layer. One of the most important concepts shown here is encapsulation. As data moves down the OSI stack, each layer adds its own header information before sending the data across the network. At the receiving side, the process is reversed through decapsulation. The slide also highlights the protocol data units, or PDUs, used at different layers. At the upper layers, the information is simply called data. At the transport layer, it becomes segments or datagrams. At the network layer, it becomes packets. At the data link layer, it becomes frames. And at the physical layer, it becomes bits. The real-world example demonstrates how this process works when browsing a website. The browser generates the request at the application layer. Encryption occurs at the presentation layer. Sessions are established. The data is segmented and routed, framed for the local network, and finally transmitted physically across the communication medium. The OSI model is also extremely useful for troubleshooting. Network professionals and auditors use it to identify where communication problems occur, whether the issue relates to applications, routing, switching, addressing, protocols, or physical connectivity. The key takeaway is that the OSI model provides a structured way to understand how networks operate, how data moves between systems, and where security and operational controls should be applied across the communication process. The OSI model is more than just a networking theory. It is a practical framework used to design, implement, secure, and troubleshoot modern network architectures. This slide demonstrates how the 7 layers of the OSI model work together to support end-to-end communication across different types of networks. Starting on the left, the OSI model separates communication into 7 layers, beginning with the physical layer at the bottom and moving up to the application layer at the top. Each layer has a specific responsibility. The lower layers focus on hardware, connectivity, framing, and routing, while the upper layers focus on sessions, applications, encryption, and user interaction. In the center, the diagram shows how data moves from a sender to a receiver. At the application layer, the user generates data such as a web request or email. As the information moves down the stack, each layer adds its own control information in a process called encapsulation. The transport layer creates segments, the network layer creates packets, the data link layer creates frames, and finally the physical layer transmits the data as bits across the communication medium. At the receiving side, the process is reversed through decapsulation until the data reaches the destination application. The right side of the slide shows how the OSI model applies to common network architectures. In a local area network, the lower layers handle Ethernet switching and local connectivity, while the upper layers support business applications and services. In a wide area network, the network layer becomes critical because routers move traffic between branch offices, service providers, and remote locations. Wireless networks rely heavily on the physical and data link layers for radio frequency communication and wireless protocols, while higher layers support routing and applications. In Internet architectures, the OSI model helps support global communication between users, Internet service providers, cloud platforms, and content servers. One of the major benefits of the OSI model is standardization. Because vendors follow common standards and protocols, devices and systems from different manufacturers can communicate reliably. The layered design also improves troubleshooting because engineers can isolate problems to a specific layer instead of investigating the entire network at once. Another key benefit is security by design. Security controls can be implemented at multiple layers, including firewalls at the network layer, encryption at the presentation layer, and authentication at the application layer. The key takeaway is that understanding the OSI model helps organizations design secure, scalable, and reliable networks while giving auditors and security professionals a structured approach to analyzing communication, controls, and risks across the enterprise. Network infrastructure security is focused on protecting the systems, devices, and communication paths that allow an organization to operate securely and reliably. At the core of this topic are the four primary security objectives: confidentiality, integrity, availability, and accountability. Confidentiality ensures that unauthorized users cannot access sensitive systems or data. Integrity ensures information remains accurate and unchanged. Availability ensures systems and services remain operational when needed. And accountability provides traceability through monitoring, logging, and audit trails. The slide then introduces several important infrastructure security controls. These include governance and policies, access control, network segmentation, firewalls, monitoring, patch management, encryption, and backup and recovery processes. Together, these controls create layered protection across the network environment. Network segmentation is especially important because it reduces exposure and limits how far attackers can move inside the environment. Firewalls and gateways help filter and control traffic between trusted and untrusted networks. Monitoring and logging provide visibility into suspicious behavior and support incident detection and investigations. Patch and configuration management reduce vulnerabilities by ensuring systems are securely configured and kept up to date. The slide also introduces several common firewall architectures. A screened host firewall uses a bastion host to provide controlled access between the internet and the internal network. A dual-homed firewall separates internal and external networks using multiple interfaces for stronger isolation. The most secure approach shown here is the demilitarized zone, or DMZ architecture. In this design, public-facing services such as web and mail servers are isolated in a separate network segment, reducing direct exposure to internal systems. Another important concept highlighted here is shadow information technology, often called shadow IT. This refers to cloud services, applications, devices, or systems used without formal approval or oversight from the organization's information technology or security teams. Examples include personal cloud storage, unauthorized collaboration platforms, or unapproved software as a service applications. Shadow IT introduces risks such as data breaches, compliance failures, poor visibility, and increased operational complexity. To manage this risk, organizations need clear policies, user awareness, approval processes, and continuous monitoring. The slide also highlights several common infrastructure threats. These include malware and ransomware, unauthorized access, denial of service attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks, insider threats, and security misconfigurations. To reduce these risks, organizations should follow best practices such as enforcing least privilege, using strong authentication and multi-factor authentication, monitoring network activity continuously, reviewing logs regularly, maintaining incident response plans, and testing backup and recovery processes. The key takeaway is that network infrastructure security requires a layered approach that combines people, processes, and technology. Strong governance, secure architectures, continuous monitoring, and proactive risk management are essential to protecting modern enterprise networks and information assets. At the application layer, the user generates data such as a web request or email. As the information moves down the stack, each layer adds its own control information in a process called encapsulation. The transport layer creates segments, the network layer creates packets, the data link layer creates frames, and finally the physical layer transmits the data as bits across the communication medium. At the receiving side, The process is reversed through decapsulation until the data reaches the destination application. The right side of the slide shows how the OSI model applies to common network architectures. In a local area network, the lower layers handle Ethernet switching and local connectivity, while the upper layers support business applications and services. In a wide area network, the network layer becomes critical because routers move traffic between branch offices, service providers, and remote locations. Wireless networks rely heavily on the physical and data link layers for radio frequency communication and wireless protocols, while higher layers support routing and applications. In Internet architectures, the OSI model helps support global communication between users, Internet service providers, cloud platforms, and content servers. One of the major benefits of the OSI model is standardization. Because vendors follow common standards and protocols, devices and systems from different manufacturers can communicate reliably. The layered design also improves troubleshooting because engineers can isolate problems to a specific layer instead of investigating the entire network at once. Another key benefit is security by design. Security controls can be implemented at multiple layers, including firewalls at the network layer, encryption at the presentation layer, and authentication at the application layer. The key takeaway is that understanding the OSI model helps organizations design secure, scalable, and reliable networks while giving auditors and security professionals a structured approach to analyzing communication, controls, and risks across the enterprise. Data classification and encryption work together to protect information assets based on their sensitivity, business value, and risk. The first section focuses on data classification. Organizations classify information into categories such as public, private, sensitive, or restricted information. Each classification level determines how the data should be handled, stored, transmitted, and protected. For example, public information may require minimal protection, while restricted or critical information requires the highest level of security controls. Classification also helps define who can access the information, what controls must be applied, and how the organization manages compliance requirements. The next section introduces encryption and encryption-related techniques. Encryption converts readable information, called plaintext, into unreadable ciphertext using an encryption algorithm and a cryptographic key. Only authorized users with the correct key can decrypt the information back into its original form. Encryption is commonly used to protect data in transit across networks and data at rest on systems, databases, laptops, and storage devices. The slide also introduces hashing functions. Unlike encryption, hashing is not designed to be reversed. A hash function generates a fixed length value called a digest or hash value. Hashing is commonly used for integrity verification, password storage, and digital signatures because even a small change in the original data produces a completely different hash value. Another important area is the key elements of encryption systems. These include encryption algorithms, cryptographic keys, key length, and secure key generation. The strength of encryption depends not only on the algorithm, but also on proper key management and the randomness of the generated keys. The slide then compares symmetric and asymmetric cryptographic systems. Symmetric encryption uses the same secret key for both encryption and decryption. It is fast and efficient, making it ideal for bulk data encryption. Examples include Advanced Encryption Standard and Triple Data Encryption Standard. However, the challenge is securely distributing and protecting the shared secret key. Asymmetric encryption, also called public key cryptography, uses two keys, a public key and a private key. One key encrypts the data and the other decrypts it. This approach supports secure key exchange, digital signatures, authentication, and non-repudiation. Examples include Rivest-Shumir-Edelman, Differ-Hellman, and elliptic curve cryptography. The slide also highlights common applications of cryptographic systems. These include secure web communications using hypertext transfer protocol secure and transport layer security, virtual private networks, secure email, digital signatures, integrity verification, authentication, database encryption, full disk encryption, and public key infrastructure. Finally, The slide emphasizes several best practices. Organizations should adopt clear data classification policies, use strong encryption algorithms with appropriate key lengths, protect cryptographic keys throughout their life cycle, monitor encryption usage, and stay aligned with evolving cryptographic standards and technologies. The key takeaway is that effective data protection depends on both proper classification and strong cryptographic controls. Together, they help organizations protect confidentiality, maintain integrity, support compliance, and reduce the risk of unauthorized access or data exposure. Public Key Infrastructure, or PKI, is a framework that enables organizations to use digital certificates and public key cryptography to establish trust, secure communications, and verify identities. At its core, PKI supports authentication, encryption, integrity, and non-repudiation across modern digital environments. The process typically begins with a subscriber, which could be a user, device, application, or system requesting a digital certificate. That request is verified by the registration authority, often called the RA, which validates the identity of the requester before approving the certificate request. The approved request is then sent to the certification authority, or CA. The CA is the trusted entity responsible for issuing, digitally signing, renewing, and revoking certificates. Once issued, the digital certificate binds the identity of the subject to a public key. Other systems and users, called relying parties, can then trust that certificate and use it to verify identities and establish secure communications. The slide also highlights the major PKI components and roles. The subscriber owns the key pair and requests the certificate. The registration authority validates identity information. The certification authority issues and signs certificates. Repositories store certificates, certificate revocation lists, and related trust information. And relying parties verify certificate validity before trusting communications or transactions. Another important area is the PKI architecture itself. The subscriber generates a public and private key pair. The public key is shared through the certificate, while the private key must remain secret and protected. Once the certificate is issued, it can be distributed and used for secure communications, authentication, digital signatures, and encryption. Digital certificates contain several important pieces of information. These include the identity of the subject's public key, the issuing certification authority, certificate serial numbers, validity periods, digital signatures, and certificate policies. The slide also explains the certificate lifecycle. Certificates are requested, validated, issued, published, verified, and eventually revoked when they expire or become compromised. If a certificate or private key can no longer be trusted, the certification authority revokes it. Organizations then use certificate revocation lists or the online certificate status protocol to verify whether certificates are still valid. PKI provides many important security benefits. It enables strong authentication of users and systems, supports encryption and secure communications, protects data integrity, enables digital signatures, and provides centralized management of certificates and cryptographic trust. Finally, the slide emphasizes several best practices. Organizations should use strong cryptographic algorithms and appropriate key lengths, carefully verify identities before issuing certificates, protect private keys with strong security controls, monitor certificate expiration and renewal processes, and maintain clear certificate policies and procedures. The key takeaway is that PKI forms the foundation of trust in modern digital communication by securely linking identities to cryptographic keys and enabling secure authentication, encryption, and verification across enterprise environments. Web-based communication technologies have transformed how organizations communicate, collaborate, and share information. They provide flexibility, mobility, and real-time connectivity, but they also introduce significant security risks that organizations must manage carefully. The first area covered is Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP. VoIP allows voice communications to travel over Internet Protocol networks instead of traditional telephone lines. This provides benefits such as reduced costs, scalability, mobility, and integration with video conferencing and messaging platforms. However, VoIP systems are exposed to risks including eavesdropping, denial of service attacks, toll fraud, unauthorized access, and voice data manipulation. To secure VoIP environments, organizations use encryption protocols, firewalls, session border controllers, strong authentication, segmentation, logging, and redundancy controls. The slide then introduces private branch exchange systems, commonly called PBX systems. A PBX is an internal telephone system that routes calls between users and external networks. Because PBX systems often connect directly to external communication services, they can become targets for fraud, interception, and unauthorized access. Security controls include restricting long-distance dialing, implementing strong administrator access controls, enabling monitoring and logging, and securing remote administration interfaces. Email security is another major focus area because email remains one of the primary attack vectors used by cybercriminals. Common threats include phishing, malware, spoofing, interception, unauthorized disclosure, and denial of service attacks. Organizations reduce these risks by using encryption technologies such as secure multipurpose internet mail extensions and pretty good privacy, implementing spam and malware filtering, digitally signing important messages, training users, and monitoring email infrastructure. The slide also discusses peer-to-peer computing. Peer-to-peer technologies allow systems to share resources directly without relying on centralized servers. While useful in some environments, they introduce risks such as malware distribution, excessive bandwidth usage, copyright violations, and data leakage. Many organizations restrict or block peer-to-peer traffic to reduce these risks. Instant messaging platforms are another important communication technology. These platforms support real-time communication and collaboration, but they can also introduce risks such as data leakage, malware transfer, inappropriate content sharing, and loss of productivity. To manage these risks, organizations often use approved corporate messaging platforms, encrypt communications, log activity, restrict file transfers, and establish clear acceptable use policies. The final section focuses on social media. Social media platforms provide business benefits such as customer engagement, brand awareness, and market intelligence. However, they also introduce risks including reputational damage, unauthorized disclosures, fraud, impersonation, and compliance violations. Organizations address these risks through social media policies, role-based approvals, user awareness training, monitoring, and incident response procedures. The overall message of the slide is that web-based communication technologies provide significant business value, but they must be supported by strong governance, secure configurations, monitoring, user awareness, and layered security controls to reduce risk and protect organizational information assets. Cloud computing has transformed the way organizations deliver and consume technology services. Instead of purchasing and maintaining all infrastructure internally, organizations can now access computing resources on demand through the internet. This slide begins by explaining the core characteristics of cloud computing. These include on-demand self-service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured service. In simple terms, cloud environments allow organizations to scale resources quickly, access systems from almost anywhere, and pay only for what they use. The slide then introduces the three major cloud service models. Infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, provides virtualized infrastructure such as servers, storage, and networking. The customer manages the operating systems, applications, and data, while the provider manages the underlying infrastructure. Platform as a service, or PaaS, provides a development and deployment platform where the provider manages most of the infrastructure and runtime environment, while the customer focuses mainly on applications and data. Software as a service, or SaaS, provides complete applications over the internet, where the provider manages almost everything and the customer primarily manages users and data access. The slide also explains the different cloud deployment models. A private cloud is dedicated to a single organization. A community cloud is shared by organizations with similar requirements. A public cloud is operated by a third-party provider and shared across multiple customers. A hybrid cloud combines multiple cloud models into a single integrated environment. The diagram in the middle of the slide shows how cloud computing works at a high level. Users connect through the internet to cloud provider environments that deliver compute, storage, networking, applications, and services. One of the major advantages of cloud computing is scalability. Resources can expand or contract dynamically based on business demand. The slide also highlights several important business benefits of cloud adoption. These include lower infrastructure costs, improved agility, scalability, high availability, disaster recovery capabilities, and the ability for organizations to focus more on business operations instead of infrastructure management. However, cloud environments also introduce significant security and governance considerations. One of the most important concepts shown here is the shared responsibility model. The cloud provider is responsible for securing the underlying infrastructure, physical facilities, virtualization layers, and core services. The customer remains responsible for areas such as identity and access management, application security, data classification, encryption, monitoring, backups, and regulatory compliance. The slide also identifies common cloud risks. These include data breaches, insecure interfaces, account hijacking, misconfigurations, loss of visibility, vendor lock-in, service outages, and compliance risks. To manage these risks, organizations should perform proper due diligence on cloud providers, review service-level agreements carefully, implement strong identity and access controls, encrypt sensitive data, continuously monitor cloud activity, and maintain backup and disaster recovery plans. The key takeaway from this slide is that cloud computing provides tremendous flexibility, scalability, and business value, but organizations must clearly understand the cloud service model, the deployment model, and the shared security responsibilities in order to protect information assets effectively. Virtualized environments have become a core part of modern IT infrastructure because they allow multiple virtual machines, or VMs, to run on a single physical server. This improves efficiency, scalability, and resource utilization, but it also introduces unique security risks that organizations must manage carefully. At the center of this slide is the virtualized environment architecture. Multiple virtual machines share the same physical host hardware through a hypervisor, which is the virtualization layer responsible for managing CPU, memory, storage, and networking resources. Each virtual machine operates independently with its own guest operating system, applications, and data. The slide also highlights the importance of management consoles and management networks. Administrative access to virtual environments should be isolated, encrypted, and tightly controlled because compromising the management layer could expose the entire virtual infrastructure. One of the key concepts here is that virtualization centralizes risk. If the hypervisor or host system is compromised, every virtual machine running on that host could potentially be affected. The slide identifies several important virtualization risks. Hypervisor compromise occurs when vulnerabilities in the virtualization layer allow attackers to gain control of the environment. VM escape or cross-VM attacks happen when an attacker breaks out of one virtual machine and gains access to others. Malware and rootkits can target the host operating system or virtualization layer to evade detection. Misconfigurations are another major issue, especially weak access controls, default settings, or insecure network segmentation. Snapshots and image files can also introduce risk because they often contain full copies of systems, including sensitive data and credentials. Insecure management interfaces may expose administrative access to attackers if not properly protected. The slide then explains different virtualization deployment models. Bare metal virtualization runs directly on the hardware and is commonly used in enterprise data centers. Hosted virtualization runs on top of a traditional operating system. Containerization provides lightweight isolation where applications share the same host kernel but operate independently. To reduce these risks, organizations must implement strong security controls and good practices. This includes secure configuration and hardening of hypervisors and hosts, regular patching and vulnerability management, strong authentication and role-based access controls, and network segmentation between virtual machines. Administrative traffic should use dedicated and encrypted management networks. Continuous monitoring, logging, and CM integration are also critical for detecting suspicious activity. Backup, snapshot, and image management must also be controlled carefully to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data. The slide also highlights several operational benefits of virtualization. These include improved hardware utilization, lower infrastructure costs, faster provisioning of systems, improved scalability, and easier management of IT resources. Mobile, wireless, and Internet of Things technologies have transformed the way organizations operate by enabling connectivity and access from virtually anywhere. Employees, customers, devices, and systems can now communicate continuously across networks, creating greater flexibility and productivity. However, these technologies also introduce significant security risks that organizations must manage carefully. The first section of this slide focuses on mobile computing. Mobile devices such as smartphones, tablets, laptops, USB drives, and wearables allow users to access applications and data remotely. While mobility improves productivity, it also increases the risk of lost or stolen devices, malware infections, unauthorized access, insecure configurations, and data leakage. To reduce these risks, organizations implement controls such as device registration, strong authentication, encryption, mobile device management solutions, remote lock and wipe capabilities, secure VPN connectivity, patch management, and user awareness training. The second section focuses on wireless networks. Wireless technologies allow devices to connect without physical cables using technologies such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, and cellular networks like 3G, 4G, and 5G. Wireless networking increases flexibility and accessibility, but because data travels through the air, it becomes more exposed to interception and unauthorized access. Common wireless risks include rogue access points, weak encryption, evil twin attacks, signal jamming, and insecure configurations. To protect wireless environments, organizations should use strong encryption standards such as WPA2 or WPA3, implement network segmentation, disable unnecessary services, monitor wireless traffic, and regularly update firmware and access point configurations. The final section focuses on Internet of Things, or IoT, devices. IoT devices include smart cameras, thermostats, lighting systems, voice assistants, connected vehicles, healthcare devices, and industrial systems. These devices are increasingly used in homes, businesses, healthcare, manufacturing, and smart city environments. Although IoT devices improve automation and operational efficiency, many of them have limited built-in security and are frequently targeted by attackers. The slide highlights several common IoT risks, including insecure default settings, weak authentication, outdated firmware, botnet attacks, denial of service attacks, and privacy concerns related to excessive data collection. Organizations should implement controls such as changing default passwords, enabling encryption, patching firmware regularly, using network segmentation, restricting device privileges, monitoring device activity, and enforcing privacy and compliance requirements. Across all three areas, the slide emphasizes several cross-cutting best practices. These include establishing clear policies and procedures, educating users, implementing defense in-depth security, continuously monitoring environments, and regularly assessing risks and compliance obligations. This slide brings together all the major concepts covered in Part A of Domain 5 and demonstrates how they are applied in a practical business scenario. The scenario describes a financial services company that relies heavily on remote work, cloud applications, mobile devices, and third-party vendors. Recently, the organization has experienced suspicious logins, phishing attempts, unauthorized file sharing, weak password practices, and unmanaged mobile devices. Because the organization handles sensitive customer and financial information, these issues create significant security and compliance risks. The objective shown in the center of the slide is for internal audit and information security teams to assess and improve the protection of information assets across the organization. The key business assets identified include customer information, financial systems, internal systems, cloud applications, and employee devices. The desired outcomes are secure and authorized access to systems and data, protection of sensitive information, regulatory compliance, reduced risk exposure, and continuous monitoring and improvement. The middle section of the slide demonstrates how each Part A topic applies directly to the scenario. The organization implements security frameworks and standards such as ISO 27001, NIST CSF, and internal policies to establish governance and security requirements. Internal auditors review whether policies, standards, monitoring processes, and controls operating effectively. Policies and procedures are reviewed to ensure password controls, remote access requirements, incident response procedures, and acceptable use standards are documented and enforced. Security awareness training helps employees recognize phishing attacks, protect credentials, and follow secure remote working practices. Data ownership and responsibilities are assigned so that business managers are accountable for protecting customer and financial information. Access standards and security baselines are implemented for laptops, servers, cloud systems, and mobile devices. Role-based access control ensures employees only access systems required for their job responsibilities. Privacy principles are applied to protect personal information in line with legal and regulatory requirements. The scenario also demonstrates physical security controls, identity and access management, logging and monitoring, access reviews, network security, data classification, encryption, PKI, virtualization security, mobile device management, wireless security, and Internet of Things security controls. The lower section of the slide shows how risks are mapped to controls. For example, stolen laptops are mitigated through full disk encryption and remote wipe capabilities. Weak passwords are addressed through password standards and multi-factor authentication. Unauthorized access is reduced through role-based access controls and quarterly access reviews. Insider threats are monitored using DLP solutions and logging technologies. The slide also includes examples of audit activities that auditors may perform during an assessment. These include reviewing provisioning procedures, inspecting firewall configurations, testing MFA implementation, reviewing access logs, sampling terminated employee accounts, assessing BYOD controls, inspecting CM monitoring, and evaluating security awareness effectiveness. The example findings section highlights common weaknesses organizations may discover during audits. These include shared administrator accounts, missing multi-factor authentication, excessive privileged access, missing data classification labels, weak mobile device controls, and poor access recertification processes. The corresponding recommendations include implementing enterprise-wide MFA, deploying PAM solutions, formalizing access reviews, improving DLP monitoring, implementing mobile device management, and strengthening logging and CM capabilities. The final section explains what this entire scenario demonstrates. It shows that Domain 5 is highly operational and control-focused. It demonstrates how security governance, access management, encryption, monitoring, privacy, mobile security, cloud security, and user awareness all work together as part of an integrated security model. These key points summarize the most important concepts to remember for CISA Domain 5 Part A, which focuses on protecting information assets through governance, access control, monitoring, encryption, and operational security. Information security frameworks, standards, and guidelines provide the structure for governance, risk management, and security controls. You should understand frameworks such as ISO 27001, NIST CSF, COBIT, CIS controls, and related standards. When auditing the ISMS, the focus is not only on documentation, but also on whether controls are implemented, monitored, and operating effectively. Policies define what must be done. Procedures explain how tasks are performed. Standards define mandatory technical or operational requirements. Auditors should verify these are approved, current, communicated, and consistently followed. Security awareness and training are critical because people are both a major risk and a major control. Training should be continuous, role-based, and measurable. Data ownership establishes accountability for classification, protection, retention, and appropriate use of information assets. Access standards and security baselines define minimum security configurations and approved settings for systems and devices. User access management and authorization controls are built around least privilege, role-based access control, segregation of duties, strong authentication, timely removal of access. Privacy principles focus on protecting personal and sensitive information while complying with regulations such as POPIA and GDPR. Physical access and environmental controls protect facilities, infrastructure, and supporting systems through layered physical security measures. Identity and access management, or IAM, ensures the right users receive the right access at the right time. Key IAM concepts include authentication, authorization, MFA, SSO, federation, provisioning and deprovisioning. Logging and monitoring provide visibility into system activities and security events. CM solutions are commonly used for centralized monitoring and alerting. Access reviews and recertification help organizations validate that users still require the access assigned to them. Network and endpoint security protect enterprise infrastructure using firewalls, IDs and IPS, VPNs, endpoint protection, anti-malware, EDR, segmentation. Data classification determines how information should be protected based on sensitivity and business impact. Encryption protects data both at rest and in transit. You should understand symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, TLS, IPsec, SSH, SMIME. Public Key Infrastructure, or PKI, supports digital certificates, encryption, authentication, VPNs, digital signatures. Web-based communication technologies include email, VoIP, messaging platforms, secure web communications. You should understand related risks such as phishing, malware, and insecure protocols. Virtualized environments introduce risks around hypervisors, VM isolation, snapshots, administrative access. Mobile, wireless, and IoT environments require strong controls such as MDM, WPA2 or WPA3, device encryption, segmentation, remote wipe capabilities. BYOD security focuses on protecting organizational data on personally owned devices through policies, encryption, separation of data, and mobile management controls. For exam preparation, remember, understand why the control exists. Focus on practical application. Think in terms of risk reduction. Understand how controls support confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Be prepared for scenario-based questions. Know how controls work together as part of a layered security model. One of the most important principles across Domain 5 is the right person should have the right access to the right resource at the right time, for the right reason. This diagram brings together how artificial intelligence can support the full audit lifecycle within CISA Domain 5 and modern information security auditing. The process starts with audit planning and risk assessment, where AI helps identify high-risk systems, suspicious behaviors, unusual patterns, and emerging threats. Machine learning models can analyze historical incidents, vulnerabilities, and control failures to help auditors prioritize audit focus areas more effectively. During audit execution and fieldwork, AI can automate evidence collection, support intelligent sampling, and perform walkthrough analysis. This reduces manual effort while increasing audit coverage and consistency. In evidence collection and analysis, AI tools can process large volumes of logs, transactions, cloud telemetry, endpoint data, and documents much faster than traditional methods. Natural language processing can review policies, procedures, contracts, and standards to identify missing controls, inconsistencies, or compliance gaps. Data analytics and CAATs are enhanced through anomaly detection, behavioral analytics, fraud detection, trend analysis, correlation across multiple systems. This enables auditors to identify unusual activity patterns that may indicate risk, fraud, misuse, or control weaknesses. Continuous auditing and monitoring is one of the most powerful capabilities shown in this diagram. AI-enabled systems can monitor controls in real time, continuously assess compliance, generate alerts, and support ongoing assurance instead of relying only on periodic audits. In reporting and insights, AI can generate dashboards, predictive risk scores, executive summaries, exception analysis, and visual trend reporting. This helps management focus on the most critical risks and control issues. The diagram also highlights key AI technologies used in auditing, including machine learning, natural language processing, robotic process automation, generative AI, predictive analytics, behavioral analytics, AI-enabled CM integration, intelligent document processing. Practical examples include detecting abnormal administrator activity, monitoring privileged access in real time, reviewing policies for missing controls, identifying unusual transaction behavior, automating access review analysis, correlating events across systems to detect control gaps. The diagram correctly emphasizes that AI introduces risks and governance concerns as well. Auditors must consider AI bias and fairness, hallucinated or inaccurate outputs, lack of explainability, data privacy concerns, security of AI systems, over-reliance on automation, governance and ethical considerations. One of the most important messages is at the bottom of the diagram. AI does not replace auditors. Professional judgment, human oversight, validation, ethics, and audit expertise remain essential. For the CISA exam and practical auditing, the key takeaway is AI enhances audit efficiency, scale, monitoring, analytics, and insight generation, but governance, oversight, evidence validation, and accountability must still be maintained by the auditor. A key concept to remember is that security is layered and interconnected. Organizations must combine policies, ownership, access controls, monitoring, encryption, network security, and governance to reduce risk and protect critical information assets. Next, we move into Part B, Security Event Management, covering threats and attack methods, malware and cyberattacks, CM and security monitoring, IDs or IPS technologies, incident response, threat intelligence, security testing, digital forensics and evidence collection. Part B shifts the focus from implementing controls to detecting, monitoring, and responding to security events effectively. This content is based on practical experience, research, and personal interpretation for educational purposes. The material is not affiliated with or endorsed by CISA or any other certification or standards organization. Thank you for following the series. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow for more content on CISA, information security, auditing, governance, and risk management.